The road seemed endless. No signs, no headlights, just black asphalt, disappearing into the night. The engine thudded like a clock about to stop, and the cold air cut like a blade. Then it happened. A howl. Deep. Too close to ignore. He looked in the rearview mirror and saw only darkness, but he felt no. You knew that he was not alone. With every kilometer, that presence grew closer, until it stopped being just a sound and began to become something much more real. Today, you will discover the road that leads nowhere, but for some it is the endless path, and if you stay until the end, you'll understand why. Nobody who heard that howl came back to tell. If this story finds a place in you, like, comment, and join our pack, because here, every howl has a name. The car was moving forward, but time seemed to stretch. The trees, previously just static shadows, now seemed to move, closing in on the road as if trying to block the way. The fog grew thick and dense, swallowing anything more than 10 meters from the headlights. The sound of the engine was constant, but muffled, as if the night was sucking in every sound. The first howl was long gone, but the sensation wasn't. This wasn't like encountering a wild animal on the road. There was an awareness to it, an intention. The rearview mirror reflected only absolute darkness, but sometimes I swore I saw something moving, like a fleeting reflection that disappeared as soon as I tried to focus. That's when the headlights revealed something. On the shoulder, the car slowed down instinctively. A body lay on the side of the road, a deer, large, motionless. Its neck was bent at an impossible angle, and its eyes, still open, reflected the light dully, lifeless. There was no blood, no bitey marks, no sign of a struggle, only a strange absence, as if something had drained more than just a body, had taken its very essence. He tried to ignore it, but something in the scene compelled his attention. Behind the deer, in the damp earth, were tracks, too large to be from a dog, too fresh to be unrelated to what was happening. They continued for a few meters and stopped right in the middle of the truck, as if something had stood there, watching, waiting. A chill ran down his spine. The urge to accelerate was instinctive, but the fear of encountering whatever had left those marks was even greater. He took a deep breath, glanced in the rearview mirror again, and noticed something that made his stomach sink. For an instant, too pale. Lights shone, motionless, as if floating in mid-rise. Watching, his heart began to beat faster. He gripped the steering wheel and put it in gear, determined to keep going. The wheels scraped small stones from the asphalt as the car picked up speed, and no matter how much he accelerated, the feeling of being followed didn't diminish. On the contrary, it grew closer. Then, it tapped to the left. Emerging from the tree line, a silhouette crossed the road. It was large, much larger than any ordinary wolf. Its fur seemed to absorb the light, and its eyes shone like two pale moons in the darkness. It didn't run. It didn't look back. It just passed slow and steady until it disappeared into the mist on the other side. The car braked on its own, as if the animal's presence had overwhelmed everything around it. The silence that followed was absolute, until a howl shattered the air. It didn't echo as before. It didn't sound distant. It came from down the road, and it was calling the sound washed over his chest like a wave, leaving a weight impossible to explain. There was no doubt this wasn't just a predator. It was a signal, an invitation, or maybe a warning. He took a deep breath, trying to convince himself that he should continue. But deep down he knew, whatever the destination on that road, it was no longer his choice to follow. The car continued on, but the road no longer felt the same. The asphalt was rougher. The yellow lines in the center were almost erased, and the edges were beginning to be swallowed by a blanket of dry leaves. The fog was thicker, undulating as if breathing. Each meter brought the sensation of crossing an invisible threshold, leaving something behind, and entering something that shouldn't be there. The dashboard began to act strangely. The digital compass spun slowly, non-stop, as if searching for a north direction that didn't exist. The speedometer shook slightly, even though the speed was constant. The GPS, previously static, suddenly went dark, leaving only a black screen. There was no radio signal. There was no sound of wind. Then he saw it ahead, an old, narrow, dark wooden bridge, crossing a river he didn't remember existing in this region. The planks seemed worn but sturdy, creaking softly even when nothing touched them. Rusty chains hung from the sides, swaying on their own, as if a wind he couldn't feel blew only there. Beside the entrance, a barely legible sign covered in moss bore a single word painted in faded red: Times. Instinct told him to stop, to turn around, but something deeper inside him was pulling him forward. He slowed, moving closer, trying to see what lay beyond. Then the fog parted enough to reveal a figure standing right in the middle of the bridge. The wolf, pitch black, motionless, watching him with pale eyes that seemed to glow from within. There was no hostility in the gaze, but there was no welcome either. It was a silent judgment. The car stopped instinctively. "Ooh!" gripped the steering wheel, his heart pounding, unsure whether to get out, honk, or simply wait. The wolf didn't move. The only thing that broke the silence was a low sound, almost a whisper, a howl, that echoed not in the forest, but inside his own mind. In that instant, he understood he wasn't being hunted. He was being called. He glanced in the rearview mirror, perhaps gathering the courage to turn back. But what he saw wasn't the road he'd come from. In its place, a white wall of solid fog, so thick it seemed made of stone. There was no turning back. The wolf took a single step back, still staring at him, as if inviting him to cross. The sound of the river below was muffled, distant, as if it didn't really exist. He took a deep breath, put the car in gear, and began to move forward slowly. With each plank crossed, the sound of the woods seemed deeper, like the slow beat of a drum. The air was chilly, but there was a strange warmth emanating from the wolf's figure, even a few feet away. When reached the middle of the bridge, the wolf slowly turned and began walking toward the other side, leading him. The feeling was clear. He wasn't just crossing a river. He was crossing a border into a place where the rules were no longer the same. And the wolf was the one who decided whether he could enter. As soon as the wheels touched the end of the bridge, something changed. The air, previously cold and humid, was now thicker, almost oily, as if each breath were an effort. The silence was absolute, but not empty. There was a weight to it, as if the darkness itself had a consciousness. The road continued, but it wasn't the same one he knew. The asphalt was cracked, covered in a thin layer of dead leaves that moved on their own, carried by a wind he couldn't feel on his skin. The trees were taller and twisted, their branches leaning as if trying to peer down at the road, each trunk covered in thick moss that seemed to pulse slowly. The wolf walked a few meters ahead, always visible, never looking back. His posture was neither one of flight nor threat. He advanced like a guide, charting a path the driver felt he had no choice but to follow. Every turn revealed something that didn't fit in with the world he knew. A small wooden house with lit windows, ... but no door. A field shrouded in mist that moved against the wind, hiding silhouettes that looked human but had no faces. Old street lights that glowed with a soft intensity, even though they weren't connected to any wires. Wolf's howl, When it came, it didn't ripple through. The air it pierced him through, vibrating his bones. There were no words, but there was meaning. It was as if the sound told him he was in the territory of something greater, something that brooked no purposeless intruders. The road began to narrow. Small symbols began to appear on the asphalt, barely visible in the headlights. They resembled ancient runes, precisely drawn and repeated at even intervals. He didn't know what they meant, but he had the feeling that each one marked a step deeper into that other side. Then the wolf stopped, slowly. It turned its head to face him. Its eyes shone brighter than ever, almost liquid reflecting. Not light, but something deep within. And then it stepped aside, revealing what lay ahead. The road ended there. There was no cove, no descent, just a black abyss, so vast that the car's headlights couldn't find its bottom. A faint wind rose from it, carrying a metallic, ancient smell, like wet iron. But it wasn't just the emptiness that disturbed him. Something was moving within, a shadow that had no fixed form, shaping and fading like smoke, but carrying the unmistakable sensation of staring back at him. The howl that followed was not a call, it was a warning. The abyss ahead seemed alive. It wasn't just the absence of a road, it was the absence of everything. The beam of the headlights dipped a few meters before being swallowed completely, as if the darkness said wait, and deep within this void, something moved, slow, calculated, as if waiting for him. The wolf remained nearby, a few meters from the edge. His eyes glowed more intensely, reflecting an almost silvery hue, as if they held within them pieces of the moon. There was no movement in his body, but the tension in the air indicated he was ready to make a decision, and that decision wouldn't be the driver's. Then, from the abyss, a presence emerged. It had no definite shape, but its shadow was larger than anything he had ever seen. It was made of fragments of darkness, its parts crumbling and reforming, carrying whispers and echoes of howls intertwined. It didn't speak, but he understood. This road was not a path, it was a destiny. The wolf stepped forward, placing itself between him and the void, and let out a howl so loud the sound didn't travel through the air, it pierced straight through him. His chest burned, his breath hitched, and something inside him responded, as if he'd heard that call before, somewhere he couldn't remember. The wind from the abyss picked up, bringing a biting chill. He knew instinctively that if he took one step forward and crossed that threshold, he would never return. At the same time, there was a strange pull, as if deep within, there was something he needed to find, or perhaps something that had already found him long before tonight. The wolf slowly turned his head, looking at him one last time, and in that look, there was a question he didn't know how to answer. Did you come here to go back, or to stay? He closed his eyes for a moment. The sound of the engine faded, the wind vanished, even the weight of the night seemed to melt away. Only the sound of his own heart remained, and in the background, a howl that seemed to come from everywhere at once. When he opened his eyes, there was no wolf. There was no abyss. He was parked on the shoulder of an ordinary road, engine running, headlights pointing at the wet asphalt, but the paw prints were there, fresh, large, impossible to ignore. In the distance, far away, a howl sounded again, and he knew it wasn't over. It was just the beginning. If you heard it too, don't ignore it. Like, comment, and join our pack, because some roads don't lead back home.